All right, so I'm here with Karen O'Neill again, and this time in a better Wi-Fi situation so that we won't have, well, I'm going to knock on wood. We won't have technical difficulties like last time. And we just thought it would be a good way for us to do a redo, so to speak. And there's my dog making noise. Hugo. That protective little puppy.
I didn't get into this last time, but a big part of the work that I've done the last 3 years in Mexico, where I live most of the time, I come to Los Angeles where I am now, you know, to see my family a lot. My mother's 86, blah, blah, blah. I'm rabbit trailing already. Anyway, I've been involved in dog rescue. So Mexico, the population of dogs to humans is about 6 to 1. And there was a mentor, and they don't sterilize. And you know what? You can sterilize an animal down there for about $30. But then you consider that the person paying for it, your average Mexican worker, if they make $30 in a day, they're doing good. So, you know, it's all relative to the scale of, you know, the money that you make.
Right. Of course. Of course. That's amazing that you do a rescue. And I know I've heard of others doing it in other islands, like down in the Caribbean and stuff as well, that there's so many strays. And it breaks my heart.
Yeah.
My heart.
Well, the work I do with, and what I'm going to be talking about today, for those that tried to listen last time and gave up saying, you know, can't do this. I work with addiction, and we'll talk about that. But the clients that I have, some of them are drug addicts. Some of them have been rejected by society by how they look, you know, tattoos, piercings, their attitude, whatever. And guess what? A dog does not care what you look like at all. You know, they're in this whole other level. And so the whole point is, you know, we have these dogs or puppies or however it is we got them, you know, maybe a litter, you know, that was turned in, or, you know, we would get called, or maybe it was just a dog that was obviously a stray on the street, needed medical care and some love. And the whole goal is to have them there for a short time, you know, love them, take care of them, take care of their medical, and then send them to their forever home, because 10 more are going to come along and take that one's place, the one that you love so much. And it's really heartbreaking at first. I cried my eyes out the first few times, you know, because they're sleeping in bed with me. Or there's this one little puppy that like had to live in my sweatshirt in the wintertime, because if you set him down, he'd cry. It was too soon for him to be separated from his mother and, you know, and his, what do you call dog siblings, whatever the word for that is. But yeah, it's just one more great way to really help everybody, you know, including, you know, how to let go, you know, how to let go and lose.
Yeah, I would find that so hard. People have said to me, you should foster animals. I'm like, I would never give them up. I'd have a house full of more pets. I already have 3, just because I love animals so much. And I often say to people that they're a great source when you're in need of healing, because they taught me a lot about unconditional love.
Yeah.
And I have a cat that has taught me so much about gratitude.
A cat, really?
I
know, they're
kind
of selfish, you know, right?
I know. But this cat, every day after I feed it, he will find me and leap on me and rub into me like he's thanking me for the food. And it just, I don't know. It changed my life as I was healing and stuff. So I'm huge on people connecting with animals when they're in a healing process. There's just nothing that can compare to that. Awesome. So let's get into what we're really here to talk about, which is the work that you do in helping people beat addiction. And this you sort of came into from your own experience dealing with bulimia, and you found a plant-based, I don't want to say drug, but you found
no, it's a medicine. It's a sacred medicine.
That's a better word. So tell your story, like how that came to be and what this is, because this is huge, and it's a shame it's not more accessible than it is.
And this is why I approached you. The world really needs to know that whatever the addiction, almost any addiction, there are alternatives you might not have heard about. It's fairly common for people to have heard about ayahuasca. It's more common for people to know about cannabis who doesn't, right? And psilocybin. And these are all medicines that can be very helpful. with releasing trauma and everything. But the medicine I work with principally is called Ibogaine. It's an extraction of the iboga tree that grows in West Africa in the rainforest. And, you know, it's been used for the millennia, coming of age ceremonies. And also if someone had PTSD, let's say they had a battle, let's say they had a trauma of some kind, it really helps them, excuse me, have to reposition myself. It really helps them reset and you're born again. You're really literally born again. So in terms of drugs, this is really known for opiate addiction. And the reason why is someone that's an opiate addict, they're going to have withdrawals. You know, they need to use about every 8 hours, depending on the strength and their amount and everything. But all this stuff, except for synthetic opiates, is short acting. And they take this medicine and we give it to them right before they would be dosing again. So they show up and we keep them on opiates at the place that I work with.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they're going to be sick and they won't be able to keep down the Ibogaine that we give them. So anyway, their withdrawals almost all the time, 90% of the time, go away. Their cravings, their physical cravings, go away. Now the mental cravings is another thing. You know, that's something, I mean, we can't avoid the personal work around our addiction, whatever the addiction is.
Yeah.
Right. You just have to do it. But what this medicine does is it turbocharges you. It makes it possible to do something that you've probably tried hundreds and hundreds of times on your own, or with treatment, or with antidepressants, or synthetic opiates, which are pure evil. Please, anybody listening to this, do not do that. You know, take your chances. You know, find a doctor that will prescribe it to you short term, explain you're coming to get treatment, or, oh, God forbid, I never advise this, but people on the streets or people that are addicted to IV drugs, they have to go out on the streets and keep doing that, or else they're going to go into withdrawals and get very sick. And, you know, so it's just, you know, it's just a problem. The United States has made synthetic opiates the cure, and it's not a cure. It makes people really sick. And you can test clean of that. But the mind, they're very sticky and it sticks in the brain. So even though the blood shows that it's not in there, it is in there. And a detox off of that with Ibogaine is a lot rougher. And those are the people that do have withdrawals. Those are the people that do have physical cravings, and they do it anyway. God bless them, you know, but it's hard and they're not fun to be around, you know, during that time, because they are really, truly suffering. You know, I've never had, you know, I've never taken, you know, heroin or anything like that. So I can't relate, but I've held so many hands of people going through this, that, you know, being sensitive, you know, I can feel what they're going through, you know, and it's just like, hey, let me rub your back. Let me rub your feet, you know, let's talk about something stupid, just to keep, you know, but let's go for a walk. Yeah, it's really hard. And so I would say to anybody watching this, please do not do the government subsidized thing. Just if you know, if you want to get off of this, switch to something short acting, however you get it, and then come and see us and we'll help you. So we have two ways of doing this. And one is a flood dose. That's a very large dose of Ibogaine, and it renders you atoxic. So you're flat on your back. You're sensitive to light. You need like an eye mask on so you can see the visions. You need help going to the bathroom. You need to stay hydrated. You need medical testing before this. Very, very important, because if you have a problem with your heart or your liver, then you can't do a high dose. But generally, those people can do low doses, which is the other way to do it, where you're doing small amounts, building it up, building it up. Each client is different. You know, we watch them very carefully. It's a case by case basis. You know, I'm not the same as you. There's no two people alike, you know, in the world. And it depends on so many factors. And they get more medicine over a longer period of time. And that's also a good way to do it. But you might not necessarily get the visuals. You don't get it over with, you know, in one moment. Or I would say, you know, within 24 hours. So I found out about this purely by accident. My ex-partner of 14 years, he was an Uber driver, and he knew someone that, or not knew someone, but had a client go for a long ride, 45 minutes each way, who had been an opiate addict for 6 years. And he just explained about all of this. I'm like, you need to, and he just happened to mention it to me when he came home that night. I'm like, oh my God, you need to find him. Where did you pick him up? Where did you drop him off? I mean, we need to, I want to do this tonight, you know, not knowing anything. You know, it took a while to prepare and it took a while to gather the money. So obviously I didn't do it right away. But when I did do it, it was like that. And I had no idea if it would work for bulimia.
Right.
I mean, there was the only thing I could find online at the time, and this was, oh, see, I was 55 years old. This was 6 years ago, my first treatment. I found some lady in Sweden that treated a woman for bulimia. And 3 days after her blood dose was done, this woman says, she's cured. I'm like, yeah, 3 days later, you know, get back to me in a year. So that was all I could find. But I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. I am ready to do whatever I have to do. Even if there's complications, I'll deal with it. I was just really, really ready to be done. So I had about a week to prepare, and it was a really amazing experience. Unfortunately, I still had the mental cravings for the binging and purging. And when I say I was bulimic, this was 35 years. My clean time was measured in days, not weeks, not months, not years. Like now, I'm free now, almost 4 years in November, I think. I like that I don't remember and I have to stop and think about it.
Yeah.
Because I don't like the whole 12-step thing of marking time, because when you're marking time, you're white knuckling it. You know, every day is awful. Every moment is awful. Yeah. And let's just say you are clean for, you know, 40 years or something, and then you take a drink or do whatever your drug of choice is 1 or 2 times, you got to start all over again. I mean, that's about shame. Shame drives us back to that behavior. Yeah. You know, shame tells us that we're pieces of shit, you know, and we don't deserve any happiness. Whereas guilt just means, oh, I did something I wish I hadn't, but you know, tomorrow's another day, or this next moment is another moment, and we can you know, make better choices. And relapse is definitely part of recovery. You know, I was clean the first time for 6 weeks, which doesn't sound like much, but compared to the 32 years before that, you know, where it was like every 2 hours, sometimes 10 times a day, keeping this big secret, you know, this big secret, doing whatever I needed to do in order to keep the secret and in order to get the food. I wrote bad checks. You know, half of my income, been a graphic designer most of my adult life, you know, went toward food, not, you know, a nice place to live, not a nice car, you know, but food that stayed in my body maybe 30 minutes or so. And then, you know, I forced it back out again. And that was just my life. And it's what I believed I needed to do. And to that extent, it did work. You know, it worked. It helped me avoid everything that I didn't want to feel.
Right, right. And, you know, we had talked previously about any kind of addiction and even, you know, any kind of disorder, like you had said, PTSD, any eating disorder, there's always, or most times, a link to trauma of some kind.
Every single time. Now, we didn't really talk about trauma too much. We know, you know, in our last talk, trauma can be just, you know, something bad that happens to us in our lifetime, usually when we're a child, you know, and it's very subjective. It can be, and I don't mean to make light, but just to show the gamut, it could be being 5 years old and not getting the cookie you wanted. You know, your cousin got it, you know, and that just made you feel unloved and unworthy. Or it can be, you know, sexual trauma, you know, being raped by a relative or a family friend, being raised in a strict religious, you know, thing where, you know, you don't get to have your voice because you're told it's wrong and sinful to advocate for yourself and question, you know, I mean, like, you know, it's a whole long gamut. Everybody is different. And I don't want to minimize that kid that didn't get the cookie, you know, and felt like they weren't loved for the next 10 years until they found, you know, something else to numb that pain, you know, because like we need to have a base of self-love. We get that from our family and from our surroundings, maybe, you know, extended family, teachers. Okay. But we don't live like a village anymore.
Yeah.
So we're very nuclear, we're very isolated, and this causes a lot of problems, which shows up with these huge epidemics we have right now on drugs, which we know about and talk about, bulimia, which we don't talk about because it repels people. You know, the idea that someone is going to stuff themselves with food, you know, potentially take away food from someone else, you know, some starving child in, you know, Eurasia or, you know, whatever, you know, there's all that shame about, you know, the kind of food we eat and how much that we eat. And then deliberately purging is repellent to most people. Most people wouldn't consider that, but
Yeah.
someone that loves themselves and has a good self-image couldn't do it,
Yeah.
you know, any more than they could cut themselves or stick a needle in their vein, right?
Right.
I mean,
all
so it
depends on
all comes to
what that
self-love.
person needs, right? Like I know people who cut themselves and found relief in that, but that's not something I could do. Like
Oh,
that
I did. You know, I mean, it was a long time ago, but I
yeah, like
understand it.
people's reaction to things, oh, sorry, people's reactions to their environment can be very different. So, you know, we tend to say, well, I would never turn to drugs if that was my
Oh,
situation.
that's really easy to say, isn't it?
That's
You
exactly
know,
it, right? Like I've seen it so many times, and I've told this story many times. It's on my podcast. I interviewed a 16-year-old who was a survivor of the Parkdale school shooting in Florida a few years ago.
yeah.
And I mean, it wasn't just immediate PTSD, and she was being bombarded with having to rewatch it on TV all the time and all these things that happened to her. But what we discovered is that people forget about the survivors. They remember those who died, they remember those who were injured. That's what they talk about, that's what they focus on, but they don't think about the survivors. And so she was left really to her own devices, developed an eating disorder because she wanted to die, but she didn't want to openly take her life.
Was it
And
survivor's guilt?
partially, I think, and
Uh-huh.
just trauma related. And
Sure.
you know, she wasn't getting the help she needed because, you know, schools have counselors, but they're not specified counselors for that kind of trauma. They're grief
Sure.
counselors, but hers wasn't grief. She ran away from the gunman, got pulled into a classroom by a teacher who unlocked the door to save her life, and watched that
Uh,
teacher shot,
uh,
get shot and die.
oh my God, that's horrible. That's horrible.
So, you know, that's not just survivor's guilt, that's fear of losing her life and having somebody else die to save her.
Wow.
um
Wow.
you know, there was so much attached to that, and so she dealt with anorexia as a result. And so this is where I often say to people, you can't judge somebody based on what they consider their choices, because we don't know the backstory. We don't know anything that has led them to that, making that choice or that decision. And my brother was a drug addict. So, you know, it was hard for us growing up because I saw glimpses of the real him, and then I saw him on drugs. And
Yeah.
they were two very different people.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
he
Not his true
thought,
self at all. There was no alignment at all.
no. And
There
he
couldn't
fought
be.
those
There
demons. He
couldn't be.
tried to do rehab 3 times and wasn't successful. And so, like, I wish we had known about this back then.
If he was ready to give it up, and that's really the key, because this plant medicine really does work for a whole gamut of addictions. But you have to be ready to do the work. And I learned that one the hard way too. I
Yeah.
was told it wasn't a magic pill or a cure, you know, and I said, yeah, I understand. But I really wanted it to be, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, it took me 6 weeks before I had my first slip. And I remember very clearly, what it was. I hadn't even binged. I just ate a little more than I normally would, felt uncomfortable. And that first purge was very difficult to do because something in me had changed. We talk about integration with plant medicines, but I believe integration is the whole process. So integration begins the moment you think, maybe this would be for me. Maybe I should try this, whatever this is, ayahuasca, psilocybin, or in my case, ibogaine. It begins there, and it's the whole, the whole intentions. And so it did change me. It did change me. But because also when you do this medicine, you are neuroplastic for up to 6 months. So whatever you do especially in the first couple of months, whatever behaviors you're doing, how you're living your life, it gets ingrained and implemented big time, more than it would for you or me today. Well, what is tomorrow like? Let's say we have a bad tomorrow and we make a couple of bad choices, whatever they are, that's just that day and it passes, right? But if you are doing something like drinking after ibogaine, even if drinking has not been a problem for that particular person, if they do drinking, or in my case, I started watching Netflix because I forgot to bring a bunch of books to read. So I'm watching Netflix. Guess what? This is what I do every night, to go to sleep. And it's a really bad habit. It's actually an addiction for me now,
Right.
And this became a thing, and I didn't know enough about it, but I was in this highly suggestive state. And so my brain's going, hey, this feels good. We got to do this all the time. So let's just say, you start gambling during that period. You're going to have a huge problem, whereas maybe you never had one before. Right. Okay. Let's say you start drinking, or drinking a little bit more, or even drinking socially a couple of times. That all really should not happen, because you're setting yourself up to be that person. The thing to do is to have high vibration activities, good time for yoga. My first 30 days, both times I did this, I couldn't afford the aftercare, so I did it myself at home. It's about surrounding yourself with the family members that aren't toxic, the ones that you just sit around and have fun with and laugh with, or going for nature walks. Or for me, I'm a big whitewater rafter. I did that a couple of times. And, just finding a new way to be, because as soon as there's a void, okay, and the void for me was, hey, I'm not thinking about food 24/7. I'm not thinking about what am I going to eat? Where am I going to buy it? How am I going to prepare it where nobody notices? What's my cover story if I get caught and then this food, goes to, someone else, not me? Damn it. I had this plan for me. And how am I going to get rid of it, physically purge where someone won't notice or hear or suspect?
Right.
Okay. So this was my life. This was my whole life. So that was gone. So nature abhors a vacuum. Something's going to come in to take its place. And I remember you telling me about your father. Yeah. He was an alcoholic, right? Yep. And he eventually stopped that. However he did it, cold turkey, I guess. But he didn't address his root causes. Why was he needing to numb himself? So he started to numb himself with food. And I think you said coffee and maybe smoking cigarettes.
And cannabis. So,
oh yeah, see, and cannabis can be really good, but that's like a medium vibration medicine. It really depends on the person. So if you're using it as a drug, it's going to be a drug. If you're going to use it as something to help you work through things and get to a better place and live a better life, then it can be more high vibration. But it really depends on the person and the personal work they've done, or the personal work they're avoiding. And that's why they got to be stoned 24/7.
That's exactly it, right? It wasn't, it was, yep, okay, I stopped drinking. Well, I'm talking about my dad.
Right.
He stopped drinking, but he didn't deal with anything that was the reason that got him to that place of drinking in the first place.
What do you think those things were?
Honestly, I'm pretty sure that, because other things have come to light in my family. Mm-hmm. My great grandfather molested his daughters. My grandmother was also an alcoholic. She died before we found out if it happened to her, but her younger sister, she had an episode where she had a flashback and remembered and had to deal and cope with that trauma. as did my dad's brother, my uncle, who also had addiction issues, porn, gambling, stuff like that. So my instincts tell me that my dad was also, and never dealt with it.
It's so much harder for boys because we expect this to happen to girls.
Right.
Okay. And men, you know, especially of your father's generation, they're taught to suck it up, hold it in, be a man.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now we raise our boys differently.
Yes.
And there's this paradigm shift. It's, you know, slow, but pretty steady, you know, where basically women are asking men to be soft and sensitive and emotional, but kick someone's ass if they need it, you know. So it's got to be really hard.
Yeah.
You know, it must be very difficult. But I think for a man to carry that, and I believe my father had the same thing. I couldn't talk to him about it because it only came to light after he died.
Yeah.
Or I only heard from my mother long after he died. So we'll never really know. But I kind of want to circle back to the sources of trauma and where they come from. And sometimes they're obvious, sometimes they're blocked.
Yeah.
Because our brain will protect us and block us, but then we can't protect our children from these people in our family or family friends that maligned us, or a sibling, or, you know, a neighbor or something.
Yeah.
But trauma is also passed down in the DNA.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know about this.
Started reading about it, and I saw
the rat experiment thing, right?
Yeah. And that fascinates me because all of a sudden so much made sense in my
yeah.
And well, you know, it's fascinating if people look into it, especially because our parents and grandparents are of the era of getting through World War II and famine and all these things, that it makes sense. Some of our issues with food, with, you know, stuff is because of that mentality that they had growing up, because food was scarce or money was scarce. And so those limiting beliefs come into play within us because it was ingrained in them. They lived it.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
And like it goes back, I can't remember if it's 4 or 6 generations. They tested it with rats. You know, they would give them, you know, a stimulus, and like 4 to 6 generations of rats later they would hear the sound where they were used to getting shocked, or, you know, or some kind of negative stimulus, and the mice, you know, so many generations later would react the same as their ancestors. Okay, now they don't live very long, right? But, you know, if this is true of rats, a very simple, you know, organism compared to us. Okay, so I have had clients that said, and they could be in denial, maybe they don't want to look at it, but it's happened enough times where it's like, look, I had loving parents. I wasn't abused. I don't know how I became this way. That's a good explanation, you know, that, or you're just, I'm sorry, but you're not going to find an addict that is not a super sensitive person deep down. Their truest self is very sensitive. And they're in this world going, oh my God, all of these things, I can't handle it. And the world doesn't know how to handle them. And maybe they have a mental illness, which I don't really believe is a mental illness. I think it's just sensitivity, and they're gifted, and the world doesn't know how to handle them. Like, you're way different. You're not fitting in. So, you know, after 20 years of hearing that shit, they're going to start to numb themselves with something. I mean, I would, you know, I would, if, you know, it's really easy to understand when we set aside the judgment, which is hard to do, especially like, as you know very well, you had an alcoholic father, a drug addict brother, who I assume has passed. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
He passed in 2013 by suicide. He just, you know, that it was funny. I remember the police officer who did the investigation asked, you know, was he suicidal before? And I said, no, he's never tried. Wait a minute. And then it came to me. I'm like, he wasn't suicidal, but he led a dangerous life. He did things that put himself in danger all the time.
It's a passive.
Exactly. And that's when it hit me. And I thought, whoa.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right? All of a sudden, I'm seeing his whole life and recognizing that, you know, it was a bigger struggle than we had even could even comprehend.
So let's just say, okay, I kind of want to follow this a little bit because I really appreciate your openness about this. These are the things that we don't want to talk about either because we're ashamed that a family member did it or because it hurts too damn much.
Yeah.
Okay, so I really want to thank you, you know, for being transparent and vulnerable. Your listeners will go, oh yeah, you know, and it's going to trigger things, and these things do need to be talked about. Let's just assume he knew about Ibogaine. Let's in 2013. Let's assume he was able to come up with the money, and it's a little expensive because it's not covered by insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And go to a country where this is legal. And we didn't really mention that this time, but this medicine is not legal in the United States. It has the legal equivalent of heroin or meth. I mean, it's ridiculous. The big pharmacies, you know, want to give you Prozac and shit like that. That doesn't work or causes, you know, bad symptoms that you have to live with and something that you have to take every day. And by the way, they are working on a synthetic equivalent for this. Yeah, it's like, I don't wear polyester. I'm certainly not putting, you know, synthetics into my body or recommend to any of my clients that they do this. And this is without knowing anything about it. I'm sorry, I'm just going to be closed-minded. Why fuck with nature? But let's just assume.
Exactly. Yes. I love that. Yes.
Yeah. If it's good enough for God, you know, I think it's good enough for me.
Yeah.
And anyone I care about.
Tribes in Africa.
Which, you know, they really had it going on, you know, the African tribes. But I'm digressing. Let's assume that your brother heard about Ibogaine and called me on the phone. And what I'm going to say, let's just say maybe that his parents were paying for it, or, you know, he saved up his money for a long, long time in to be able to do it. I'm going to tell the parents, if they're paying for it, wait until he's on his knees crying and begging you, promising anything. Okay. Then you send him to me. Then you send him for treatment wherever you send him. Then it's got the best chance of working.
Right, of course. And I've said this to a lot of people. You can't help somebody who doesn't want to help themselves. Right. And that was the thing, is especially when my niece was born, I made a decision at that point that I needed to protect her. I loved my brother, but until he was ready to help himself, I needed to make sure that his daughter was taken care of.
So you helped raise her or stayed in contact with her, but not him, or?
Well, both, kind of all of the above. I mean, I've been forever present in her life, even though he was no longer with her mom. We've stayed in good standing with her and been supportive. And you know, there was a bit of estrangement that ended up happening because the court got involved because on a cocaine rampage, you know, he did some damage in their house and put them at risk. And unfortunately, I felt that there were consequences to that because he put his daughter at risk. I mean, they weren't home when he did it, but you know, it created some bad. I don't know how best to say that. Not bad vibes, but it just became apparent that he was in a destructive mode. And so my main concern was my niece, and always has been, just because I wanted to believe that my brother would be there for her. But given history, I knew that there was a chance he wouldn't.
Right.
And if he couldn't get clean for the sake of his daughter, then I wasn't sure that anything would get him to the point of being able to help himself and wanting that.
And I'm guessing that's why he killed himself. He couldn't do it. And the treatment available in the States is pathetic. It's got less than a 5% chance of working. And by that, you know, by that statistic, I mean like a year later from, you know, the day they enter into whatever treatment program or a 12-step program or whatever, they've got less than a 5% chance of being free of that behavior, that substance a year later. That sucks. I mean, this is not okay. And I'm going to get all passionate here, because plants are the way. Plants can really help you to do the impossible. I did the impossible 35 years, okay? After like the first 5 years of just, I was so young, I was in my 20s. I got to the point pretty quickly where it's like, I'm going to do better tomorrow. I'm going to do better in the next 5 minutes. And I fucking couldn't, and it wasn't because I wasn't trying. I white knuckled it every day. So I would maybe be able to get like a day or two together where I didn't do this behavior. Maybe I would, get to the point after I first got help 10 years into it, I got my purging down to twice a day. Now that doesn't sound like much, but when you consider what it was huge. But I was white knuckling it the whole time. It was hellish. It was hellish because the case of food being a little different from drugs in that you don't have to take drugs to live. You do have to learn how to create a healthy relationship with food.
Yeah.
For most of us, the first time. And let's just say we don't think we have an eating disorder. We are in a society that has unhealthy GMO crap. Yeah. Okay, that makes us want more Cheetos, that makes us, and especially poor people, are stuck with processed foods because here produce is expensive.
Yes.
It's expensive. And I imagine in Canada, it's even more expensive because you got to have it shipped in half of the year, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Now in Mexico, things are really cheap. It's very easy to, have a healthy diet there. But most people don't have that option and consider also, and I'm very poor, okay, but my American dollars go a lot further there because, the work that the clients I have are almost always American, and so I get a percentage of that. And when I have an eating disorder client, I get a certain amount of money and that money carries me for a couple of months. That's how I get by. But by your standards, by most standards, I'm like food stamp baby. If I were to apply for it, they'd just like laugh. What? You make what? It's really crazy to find a passion very late in life. I'm in my early 60s. So late in life after living the life that I did. And now, thanks to you and people like you that I'm like, please, can I be on your podcast? Please, please, please. I have to tell the world that this works for addiction, but specifically there's nobody out there except for me saying this works for eating disorders. If you're ready, this works. And guess what? I've been through that valley. I've been through that forest and I did come out the other side. And you're different from me. So your path is going to be different, but I've got some protocols. I've got like a list of things that we can do with you in person. I'll be there at their side during treatment. I have every meal with them. I stay, in their cabin because where I work on and off, it's like a 6 villas and a clubhouse and it's all enclosed. There's a pool. It's very nice, and I'll be with them. It's like, hey, I use some of the treatment things that are done at eating disorder clinics here in the States where when you eat, no bathroom for 2 hours unless I'm standing outside the door. We have to help, it's my job to protect you from yourself, because if you do this after treatment, it's going to be harder than ever because you're doubling down with the neuroplasticity I was speaking about earlier. You're going to make this worse than it's ever been before. And it's my job to help you not do that, at least while you're here.
Exactly. And I think too, if we look at any rehabilitation center in North America, if there was that kind of follow through, there's way more success just from the follow through, right? But then when you add the Ibogaine and what it does, and then have you as a mentor as that step by step, let's get you through those 6 months to wellness. Let's really work at the emotional side of those things. That's huge.
And we even do this, thank you. We do this before they even give the medicine. I have a couple of journaling exercises that they can do before they do the medicine. And one is where we look at all the addictions they have, we write them down, and then we decide which ones we want to be abstinent from. And those are usually pretty easy, drugs, in my case, binging and purging. Alcohol may or may not be part of it, but they still shouldn't drink alcohol for at least 6 months.
Right.
And same thing with cannabis, I believe, although during the, my leg's falling asleep. During the Ibogaine treatment itself, cannabis is a great partner. with it. And I don't smoke pot. I'm one of those that gets all weird, and you know, it's not a good medicine for me, but on iboga or ibogaine, it's a wonderful partner. You know, it helps you,
That makes
you know,
sense.
it helps you get more out of it. So that's about the only time that I'll do that. And honestly, I don't do medicine very much because there needs to be a reason to do it, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, we look at our addictions, write them down, and pick the ones we want to be abstinent from, but to get a good look at all the other things going on too. You know, whether it's smoking or in my case, Netflix, some people gambling, some, you know, pornography. I mean, there, you know, all kinds of things, compulsive shopping. How do they manage their emotions? Are they honest or are they hiding things? Are they actively lying? Of course they are because they're addicts, but how, you know, how do you want to transition, you know, to not be that liar and just say, hey, this is me.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, don't look, you know, because I'm sorry, I'm a little rough right now. You know, I'm going through some stuff, you know, and that's why these people need to, when they get back home and while they're with me, think about what's my life going to be like back home? Can I move? You know, can I move? Because if there's a drug dealer right outside my door on the street corner, whew, that's a trigger I don't want to deal with. Now, in my case, I'm sorry, there is a restaurant on every corner. So I can't move to a place where there's no food. But again, you know, these are the differences, subtle but huge differences when you look at each particular addiction. You're not going to find too many bulimics or anorexics that have lived on the street compared to people that were drug addicts.
Right.
Okay, where living on the street is a lot more common. If it's literally on the street or couch surfing from place to places, you get kicked out, you know, due to one's own behavior, right? And burning bridges behind them. I mean, it's rough. But by looking at their addictions and also a trauma timeline of their life, and by trauma, I just mean significant events, you know, a move, a grandparent dying, a parent dying, a divorce, a remarriage. Look at all of those. So they do this before they ever show up to the center, hopefully, or they get a good chunk in it. So this stuff is in all the stuff they've been repressing and don't want to think about. It's right here, you know, in the forefront. Yeah. And that way, when they take the medicine, it's fresh and the medicine's just going to attack it.
Yeah.
You know, and give answers, you know. And in my case, my first experience with ibogaine, I literally had answers. I had flashcards, you know, that showed up. It was Arial black red lettering telling me what to do. Pay your bills on time, work out every day, you know, do what you hate first and get that out of the way. You know, those kinds of things that I knew to do. We all know what we're supposed to do, right? But I couldn't do it because this addiction was in my way. And it was telling me, okay, when you're out of this medicine experience, this is how it has to be for you if you want to be better.
Yeah.
And a little more about ibogaine and the difference between this and other medicines, sacred medicines like ayahuasca, psilocybin, peyote. Ibogaine has a reset potential. It goes through just about every area of the brain and resets it. So your tastes are like when you were a child.
Yeah.
Okay, so for years, the smell of alcohol, and alcohol wasn't really my problem. It kind of became a problem. So I didn't drink for a long time. And also the alcohol, if I would even smell it or see a bottle on a billboard, if I were driving down the road, I would just like, ugh, you know, it just gave me this, you know, very averse reaction, you know, and that's the beauty of this. You know, a 7-year-old kid, you know, you pour some whiskey and say, here, you want a drink? And they're going to smell it, or God forbid, if they taste it, it's going to be repugnant to them. Yeah. We all had to teach ourselves to like alcohol. You know, not too many people are born liking, you know, that kind of thing. I don't think anybody's born with the inclination to stick a needle in their veins with, you know, speedballs or, you know, whatever. You know,
exactly. We do anything we can to avoid pain.
Yes. So the child is just going to, you know, you're reset to the child's taste temporarily, not forever. But that's the amazing part of this reset. It gives you this window of opportunity that you can't get any other way that we know of, to fill up your cup, to fill up your vessel with the good stuff, you know. And maybe someone's going to learn how to play piano. You know, maybe, you know, they've got time to do it now. because they are free from these thinkings. But while they're at the center that I work with, and I've worked with these people on and off for 3 years and very good friends, we just give them a bunch of activities to do every day in the schedule, unless they're on medicine. And this can involve things like yoga, qigong, which is like a nice body movement, nature walks, make them make their own bed, wash their own dishes, because hey, we're part of a community here, and you might not be used to that, or you might be used to a community of flop houses, but this ain't that. And we're going to help you get it right, and we love you, and we have expectations of you in order to be here.
Back to that village mentality.
That is so important.
Yeah.
And we don't have that in the United States. And that's the other part, when they go home, it's like, how are you going to find like-minded people? And it was really hard during the pandemic when nobody could meet. They had to do it online, and it was hard. Let me tell you, the pandemic was good for business, because, and sorry to be flip, but it either brought people closer together, like, hey, we have to, have dinner together every night. Never did that before. Or it drove people apart and drove addictions deeper, existing addictions deeper.
Yeah. Such a fascinating topic, because addiction in whatever form affects almost everybody, whether it's themselves dealing with it or people around them. And this is what I find so not funny, haha, but funny.
Ironic
is that nobody wants to talk about it because they think they're the only ones. When really, if we just opened up about it, we'd come to learn that we probably have more in common in that area than people think or assume.
Well, and like our conversations, you have these podcasts to help women develop their businesses, but you never had anybody like me before that's like, yes, this is my business, but oh, hey, it's psychedelics. And guess what? Psychedelics are good, not bad. We're all still victims of Nixon era brainwashing, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and they're even going back to using psychedelics in treating trauma patients and PTSD, because
so good.
It helps open up some of those areas and really digging into the stories to then help change the narrative so that it no longer becomes a trigger. It's no longer fear-based. So we, in order to change, we have to change.
That's my point. It ain't a magic pill, no matter how badly someone wants it to be. And, if it were, it wouldn't really be worth it, because you really have to, we're the sum of all of our experiences. And that includes every shitty thing we've ever done to ourselves, to the people around us, and when I came out of my addiction 3.5, 4 years ago, I spent a good 2 years ashamed, that it took so long, 3 ex-husbands. I didn't own my own home anymore. I don't have a 401k. I don't know what I'm going to do when it's retirement time. And guess what? I am retirement age, but my life is really just getting started right now. And, all the things that we're supposed to do. Yeah. And then I would change the narrative on that story. It's like, but this was my path. If I could have done it differently, I would have. This doesn't make me a bad person or a failure. It makes me a success. And yeah, it took a long time. But the success I have is what drives the passion for me to talk to people like you, to anybody that has a podcast audience, to say, Ibogaine works for eating disorders. Ibogaine works for other addictions. You need to know, or, anybody listening needs to know there's options they've not heard of or haven't considered. And that's really my mission. I hope someday that there will be an Ibogaine clinic just for people with eating disorders. If there will be, it'll because I was the impetus, and I'll be in the middle of all of that. But I'm afraid I'm going to be 95 by then.
No, don't say that.
But oh no, I don't want to live past 80. Are you kidding? things get harder, things hurt.
Things break
Yeah,
down.
no, the synapses, you know, the neuroplasticity is like, you know, delayed response. It's a real thing. Old people don't like to complain. They're talking about real shit that's happening. But anyway, we all fall into that as we get older, and we all understand a little better. But my point is, there needs to be this. And my job right now, and I elected myself, and I'm not shutting up anytime soon, is that I just want to bring awareness. I have to, you know, I have to.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm happy to help do that in whatever way I can, because I think people need to take responsibility for their journey to wellness. And that means looking at all the options. What is right for you? What can we help you with to get you where you want to be? And so getting the word out there, I totally get it. Right. And it's even just getting people to talk about it, to open up about it, to share, hey, you know what? I watched this video and they were talking about Ibogaine. This might be something that your daughter should use, right? Like, it just hopefully gets people talking, which is what I'm all about, which is why I call my company Raise Your Voice.
Well, that takes the sting off of it. That takes the shame out of it, because, you know, we're still a tribe, you know, and a good point, like to other addictions like gambling, drinking, drugs, those people do have the option of having their community and their tribe. Okay, it's a messed up tribe, but you know, they have to go somewhere to get the liquor, right? They're talking to the store clerk, or maybe at a bar, you know, and people around them and friends or whatever. Drug addicts, you got to go buy your drugs somewhere. Well, there aren't, whoopsie. 1 second. There are not too many people that have barf buddies.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, you know, again, very lonely and very much in the closet. I was just, you know, or binge buddies without purging. Yeah.
Yeah. Misery loves company, but not in that case. That's a very isolating addiction.
Yes. But, you know, even the people that do have tribes or have the option of a tribe, many of them use alone, you know, many of them drink alone and keep it secret. And so, you know, it's all about bringing it out of the closet. And, you know, for me, I was in the closet for 9 years. And then finally one day I had to get help. I couldn't do my job anymore. And I knew how to do my job, but I couldn't, as a graphic designer, I couldn't design on colors, you know, 6 hours. And I can't, you know, decide what color the type's going to be, you know, versus the background. It's like, okay, I do know how to do this, but I couldn't. I was so scrambled, you know, from, you know, the addiction and what it does to the brain, the electrolytes, and, you know, the constant purging and the constant, you know, talk in my head about how am I gonna work out the next binge, because like I'm feeling I need to go do that pretty soon, you know. So anyway, what was my point about that? Hey. Oh, I know, it was about honesty. So that's when I started getting help. You know, I got therapy, I got antidepressants, I did inpatient treatment, 12-step groups. I did all the normal things, you know, that we're told to do. And then I was out of the closet, and then my family knew, whatever husband I was married to at the time knew, and the next one after him knew, and the boyfriend after that knew. And then it creates, you know, you're absolutely right. It has to get out of the closet, but it also creates pressure, because once you put it out there, then everybody's being hyper vigilant over you. And that is unintentional pressure that can make things worse. So I found myself many, many times presenting a partial truth as the whole truth. How you doing? Oh, I'm just fine. Oh yeah, that's not a problem anymore. Yeah, bullshit, it wasn't. You know, are you kidding? How
we're trying to protect everybody else.
Well, and really honestly, myself.
Yeah.
You know, so that I still have the freedom to be able to do it if I chose to do it, which I chose to do it just about every day and multiple times a day, most days. Yeah. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword, you know, but at the end of the day, we do have to talk about those steps were part of my journey and my path. Mm-hmm. And while I regret it to a degree, years and years later, I really couldn't have done any differently, and neither can any other addict, as they are getting, you know, starting to talk about this, you know, give it voice, you know, be vulnerable with someone, but then understand that you got to be careful who you tell.
Right.
Okay. Because they, you know, because of their reaction and judgment and just do this. or just stop. Like, oh, wow, I never thought about that. Thank you.
Oh,
Got it. Got it. I'm cured. God bless you.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a real rough thing, whatever, whatever the addiction is. So yes, talk about it. Also understand that if you hear from someone that they have an addiction, whatever it is, they are not going to be honest with you for a very long time. But, love them, congratulate them, encourage them for, being willing to be transparent, because that's a big, hard thing for them to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just buy the bullshit, buy their lies, because that's part of, if you can, that's part of getting them to, take that next step, that next step toward, mental, being happy with yourself and being happy with your life, which is, an emotional sobriety, I guess is a way to put it. That,
yeah, I like that.
yeah. Well, I can't call myself emotionally sober. I still get mad once in a while. And, I have menopause now for 19 years. It's like, when is that going away? So, but, I mean, this is just life problems. I'm pretty good now. I have to remind myself to eat.
Yeah.
I have to remind myself to eat enough. I have to remind myself to exercise and, and move my body. That's a hard one because I was sick a lot last year. I had COVID twice, I had pneumonia a third time. DNA, speaking of DNA that we were talking about before, both parents have or had terminal lung illnesses. So, that's just the cards I was dealt. So, because of those illnesses, I wasn't, moving, and because COVID gives you a lot of inflammation, I gained weight, like, and I eat so little, but if I do move my body, and if I do, the things that humans are supposed to do, like back in the day when we were outside 12 hours a day, right? Farming, hunting, gathering, whatever it was, we needed to do, that's what our bodies are supposed to do. They're supposed to be outside and they're supposed to move.
Yeah.
So I'm just finding it difficult to make myself do those things right now.
Yeah.
And these are just struggles that we have, people that smoke cigarettes. Well, they know that they shouldn't do it, but they got to be willing to do what it takes to stop, and I'm just throwing out, different struggles that we all have, whatever they are. And this is life. I mean, we're spiritual beings, right? In this meat suit, having this human experience. Exactly. Why? To get a little better, to get a little better, to ascend, to evolve, to.
Yes. Yeah. I love it. Absolutely. Well, it's such a powerful message and such a powerful tool that's out there that can really help people. So I think it's great that you're speaking out about it, that you're sharing it.
Thank you.
Because people need to hear that it exists and that it's possibly for them.
Possibly, yeah. And I'm very clear to say this isn't for everybody. You need medical testing. You can't do this alone. There are people that can order it from Africa, and they're just like, hawking it on the streets, like, hustling, like any other, hood, right? Where you can buy things. But this is a very powerful medicine. It's potentially fatal, especially if you're detoxing. I mean, it's as safe as a cup of coffee if you have a safe, qualified provider, if you have medical testing done, if it's done responsibly, and you know the dosage, and you know the difference between iboga and ibogaine. So ibogaine is the extraction, iboga is the root bark itself, and you have to take a whole lot more of that, and you're more likely to purge. Oh, you'll definitely purge if you do it that way, the traditional way. But this all came into our modern times about 60, 70 years ago. A man by the name of Howard Lotsof. He was 19 years old. He was a heroin addict, and he was a college student on the East Coast. And he showed up at a friend's house who was a chemist, just looking for something fun to do, needing a substance. Basically, he was an addict, so anything goes, right? Where's the cliff? Show me where it is and I'll jump off. So the chemist says, try this. And he did. And it was ibogaine, the extracted, not the root bark. And the next day he gets up, starts moving again, and says, well, that was a weird experience. And I don't know what he saw or anything, but he noticed he had no desire to use. Okay. And he stayed clean for years. And then he thought he was onto something. So being a heroin addict, he had heroin addict friends, and he gave it to 6 or 7 of them. And they all but one stayed clean for a significant amount of time. So then this guy, Mr. Howard Lotsof, he devoted the rest of his life to this, to getting a patent on it, to getting studies done, which we need a whole lot more, to making it available, to helping people open clinics. He devoted his whole life to it. So, thank God, that there were people that were willing to be pioneers.
Yeah, well, and that is the case in so many things we have in the world. But yeah, important to get it out there and get people knowing that it exists and possibly can help.
Yes. And it's not an accident. There's a spirit to it. It's interesting because the very fundamentalist Christians, either the born agains or people that have been very religious their whole life, they don't have a problem with this medicine or other psychoactive medicines at all. They believe, hey, an intelligent God put this here for us. Why would we not do it? It's everybody in the middle, people affected, what they were told in school, what the laws are, that there's no difference between cocaine and heroin and peyote, that it's all, it's all drugs, and it all, you should go to prison if you use any of these things.
Yeah.
Where we've been brainwashed, for about 60, 70 years, and it's stopping because the people are demanding their right to use plants.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's fascinating, actually.
Yeah.
Seeing it all sort of start to shift. So hopefully it keeps going in the right direction.
It is. We have psilocybin, my home state, Oregon, legalized psilocybin, not to just go to a dispensary and get it. And honestly, anybody that wants psilocybin, they can find a way to get it, or they can grow their own. Okay. But it's important that the laws reflect this. So the law in Oregon, and they've got 2 years to set this up, well, about 1.5 years now. It has to be done through a qualified therapist, and blah, blah, blah. They've got a lot of restrictions around it, but I'm thinking eventually that will go away. Right. Because that's how it started with cannabis. You needed a doctor's prescription. So just right up the road from me at Venice Beach, I remember the guys in the green scrubs, with the green cross, the Red Cross, Green Cross on them. And then big sign saying the doctor is in, and you go in and you would say, yeah, I'm biting my nails, or I got cramps, and for $40, you get that prescription, and it's all a big joke. Well, now there's dispensaries here in California. And again, I don't smoke cannabis, but like I can go 3 blocks away from here probably and walk in and get whatever I want.
Right. Yeah.
And that's how it should be.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you so much. I'm glad we were able to do it again with a better connection.
Yes. Thank you. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, my pleasure.
It's a labor of love, what you do, truly.
It is. I do. And I love connecting with people. I love learning, and it's kind of all of the above. So yeah, it's perfect. Oh, there goes my dog. All right. So Thank you so much. Let's get this out there for people to see. And I look forward to staying in touch and seeing how it evolves.
So to contact me, just find me on Facebook. It's Karen O'Neill, Oneel. There's 2 of us. I'm the one that looks like this. Thank you. Thank you again.